Again, we'd like to welcome everybody this morning and hope you've had a great week and come expecting this morning. I got a word that's been really burning in my spirit for the last couple of weeks, and I've been studying this and thinking about it really hard this past week. But I want to talk about performance versus presence today. If you would, you can go ahead and be turning to John chapter 15. I got some questions here that I want to ask us and just kind of share my heart for just a few minutes. And I may not be long. We don't know. We'll just see what God has to say this morning. I don't want it to be me. I want the Lord to share what He wants us to hear today. But performance versus presence. I really feel like that's a problem with the church today, or what is a big portion of the problem with the church. We've got into the performance side of things instead of the presence. And if you hold on with me, we'll get there in just a minute. But one of the questions that I would ask is, and you guys can help me with this, what is a list of things that you think would make you have the appearance of being productive in the kingdom of God? I've got a list, but anybody want to volunteer one? Y'all going to be quiet on me this morning? Serving, that's one I got wrote down. All right, serving. We feel like we need to be serving. We need to be doing things, right? That's production, right? What's something else that we feel like spiritually that we should be producing, have production in our lives for? Fruit? Anything else? Witnessing? Giving? That's a key too. I got that one down. Fasting, praying, reading, right? How much is enough? How much should we pray? Without ceasing? But do we get into that mindset that I got to do this so many minutes or so much, How many of you said, well, I got to go pray? How many of you said, well, I got to go read my Bible for today? How many of you said, well, I got to go teach a class in the morning? Come on, think about it. I'm serious. Are we more about performance than we are about the presence of God? Prayer, like y'all said, 1 Thessalonians chapter 15, 5, verse 16 through 18, if you read that, it tells us to pray without ceasing, right? Serving, Galatians 5 and verse 13 says, for you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. We're called to serve one another. We're called to pray. Worship. Ephesians 5 and 19 tells us to speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Giving, if you go to Malachi chapter 3, verse 18 through 20, I'll just paraphrase that for you. It tells you that He's going to give you blessings that you can't contain. Is there anything wrong with any of those things? Nothing wrong with them. The problem is we get them in the wrong perspective, in the wrong place, in the wrong position. And that's really what in my heart, I feel like the problem with the church today is we've got into production. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to read. I have to pray. Instead of having presence with the Father, being in His presence, right? If the church, and I'm not talking about just people here, I'm talking about the church, period. If we were, as a church, Just look at Acts chapter 2. What did it say they were? They were all in one mind and one accord. And that one mind and one accord, they were looking for the word from the Father, right? Are we just going through the motions? I mean, that's really what I see. It's the church has been going through the motions for a long time. And the people in the world that are looking for God, they don't see anything that they want to see in the church today. That's just walking through the motions. I got to go pray. I got to go read. I got to teach a class today. I got to lead worship today. All those things. I got to go to church. How many of you have said it? We've all said it, right? We probably said it a few times. Oh, I got to go preach. Is that production or is that presence? Yeah, I know this really stinks this morning. It's hard. It's hard on all of us, right? But in theirself, there's nothing wrong with praying. Like I said, pray without ceasing. Worship. Serving. That's all what we're called to do. But are we doing it just because that's what we've been told we should be doing? Let's go to John chapter 15. Starting with verse 1, it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me. You catch that? Abide in me. That's the key to it. When we abide in Him, we'll be in presence and not in production. You know, there's a difference between just, like I say, performing. Are we actors? I mean, if that's what you're here for, then you're in the wrong place. We're not called to be actors. We're called to abide in Him. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears what? Much fruit. How many of you want to bear fruit? We really all want to bear fruit, right? But how many of us has felt like, I ain't going anywhere, I'm not accomplishing anything? We need to check and see where we're at. Are we just producing just because that's what we've been told and been taught that what we should do? Are we actually abiding with the Father? Are we in His presence? And it goes on here to say, that he who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. For without me, you can do. So what are we accomplishing if we're just performing? Nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear what? What kind of fruit? Much fruit. You know, we try to produce things. We try to make it happen. And it really don't yield us anything, does it? Does it help the kingdom? No. We got a bunch of powerless people in the church that's not accomplishing anything for the kingdom. That hurts, don't it? That stinks when you think about, well, I'm probably in that position. Verse 8, it says, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, so you will be my disciples." You know, we live in a fast-paced world today, and how many of you live by a schedule, a calendar, appointments all day long? You know, just boom, boom, boom. Delana accidentally shared our calendar with somebody else one time, and she like to had a stroke. Like, she looked at it and thought it might have been hers, and she was like, "What in the world is going on here?" How many of you live by that calendar? That if it's not on there, that it don't exist, right? That's production, ain't it? You know, how many of you, I mean, think about it though, seriously. What has our world been driven about? It's about a production, ain't it? What are works telling you to do? Produce, 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 produce. Scott, what are you supposed to produce? Miles, right? Right? It depends on what it is. I'm supposed to produce sales in my regular job. What are you supposed to produce? You know, and that's, you know, years ago when Schaffner was out here, we had a production bonus. Right? Donnie tell you, how many production bonuses did we get? We got them all if they were available. If the salesman sold enough for us to make a bonus, we got it. We have that mentality about work, but do we have it about the kingdom? How many of you 30 minutes early for work, but you're okay with being 30 minutes late for church? Truth, right? We'll do whatever it takes to make it to work, but if we stub our toe, we'll stay home because it hurts. Right? I mean, just being honest. Come on, let's think about it. It's a production mindset versus the presence mindset. Which one are you going to cultivate? Which one do you want to make produce fruit? You know, and you can, like I say, those different things. We have to-do lists, right? How many of you ladies has got a long list for your husbands to do? I know one back there raising her hand up right now. We look at, I mean, we have those mental lists too, right? Like I said, spiritually, we got those mental lists. Oh, I got to pray. I got to do this. I got to do that. Is that really getting us anywhere? Just going through the motions. Is that furthering the kingdom of God? No. That's convicting, ain't it? I don't want it to be condemning. I want it to be convicting. I want us to understand the difference. The difference is conviction is from God. Condemnation is from man. You know, I'm not trying to condemn anybody. I'm preaching to the choir, as George said this morning. I'm preaching to myself. We got to change our mindset. But, you know, we got to-do lists. And like I said, on those thoughts and those ideals, do I pray enough? Do I read enough? Have I done enough? Have I worked enough? And that's not what it's about. When we have the real presence in the right relationship with the Father, all those questions won't matter. They'll be answered on their own. You know, how many of you guys remember chasing that lady? What did you do? You done anything and everything that you thought that might make her happy, right? That might please her in that moment. And ladies, you done the same thing, right? That relationship was cultivated. right? We talk a lot about relationship around here, and that's really what it's key about. Having that relationship with the Father. Seeking Him. Spending quality time with Him. Do you want that relationship to produce fruit? Most of us should, or we should. Some, you can really see that fruit grow. But we can change those questions around. And you can put whatever you want to in that blank. Do I do enough? Whatever it is. And that's a question that you have to answer on your own. But we have to abide in the vine. You have to. Even in the natural world, if we want things to produce fruit, there has to be pruning. There has to be adjustments made in those things. In the vine, you got to prune them. If you want things to grow, you got to plant seed. But we get in those different mindsets and things change. But, we assume that more output or more intensity is required for growth, don't we? Oh, the more I do, the better I'm going to be. Is that where it needs to be? The more I serve, I'm going to be better off. The more I give, the better off I'm going to be. So, with all that being said, like I said, a couple more questions here. Is there anything wrong with any of these things in themselves? There's nothing wrong with prayer. There's nothing wrong with serving Him. There's nothing wrong with giving. Nothing wrong with serving others. There's nothing wrong with any of those things in themselves. But the mindset and how we operate on them is different. Can we do those things without a relationship with God? Yeah. You can serve. You can do a lot of things without a relationship with the Father. Is it going to be real effective? Nope. So, presence is shifting from what am I doing for God to am I staying with God? Think about that. Performance to presence would be the questions of instead of what am I doing for God, you need to be asking, am I staying with God? Am I close to the Father? And when we make those things our key priority, our key mindset, we change it all. We can be like Mary or Martha. Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42, it says, now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But always gets us in trouble, don't it? It says, but Martha was distracted with much serving. And she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? How many of you have asked that question? Well, do the pastors not care that I'm here doing this all by myself? I'm the only one. We get in that same boat with Elijah, don't we? God, I'm the only one that's left. He said, wrong answer. There's a whole lot more than you around here. But we get in that pity party. We get in that place of production instead of in the presence of the Father and staying there. Here she was, God, make my sister help me. I've invited you in. and I'm busy serving you, but nobody's going to help me. She says, therefore, tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha. How many of you remember being called by your mom and saying your name twice, or saying your name and your middle name to go along with it? You know you're in trouble then, don't you? It's done, went too far, ain't it? But Jesus said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed. What is it? And Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. She stayed in the presence, not worried about serving or about what everything else was going on. When we stay in His presence, the serving, the praying, the reading will all come into alignment and do what it's supposed to be. We'll seek it. You know, only the relationships that we cultivate will produce fruit. Right? How many seeds that you don't plant in the garden is going to produce fruit? None of them do. If you don't plant it, it don't grow, does it? It's not going to produce any fruit. You know, as married couples, newlyweds, you can sit next to your spouse for weeks, but if there's no intimacy, there will be no fruit. Think about that one. Let that sink in. If there is no intimacy, there will be no fruit produced. Nothing will be birthed if there's no intimacy. It's about a relationship, and that relationship with the Father. You know, and we can go through those motions of prayer and reading and serving without intimacy with the Father, and it's still going to produce what it has been producing, ain't it? You know, again, like I said, we've been raised in a society that's been largely dominated by production numbers, bonuses, quotas, and so on. And like I say, nothing is wrong with production. If it hadn't been for a lot of the production that's went on, our nation wouldn't be in the place it's at, right? But we've changed the church from the presence mindset to that production mindset. You know, last week we celebrated 250 years as a nation, right? A nation that by all intents and purposes was designed to be a Christian nation, a nation that followed God. I think we're drifting further all the time. And a lot of that, in my mindset, I attribute to the fact that we've changed from a production mindset to a presence, or from a presence mindset to a production mindset. In sales, are you going to sell anything that you're not excited about? Anything that you're not willing to use on your own? Are you going to sell a whole lot of that without enthusiasm? You know, not that we should be selling Christ, but if we're living it, if we're walking in His presence continually, the people around you are going to see that. They're going to see what you got, and they're going to want it. If you're really walking in His presence, it's going to glow on you. It's going to be shown. How many of you want to be like Moses and have to wear a veil because His presence is so strong upon you that nobody really wants to see it? Like I said, this nation was created to carry the gospel, and it's done more in that time to share the gospel across the world. You know, if it hadn't been for America, a lot of the people that know the Lord wouldn't know Him today, just because of the production that we've done. I looked up some statistics about just missionaries, and I'm not asking anybody to be a missionary today. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is one of the areas that America has excelled in the past. And a lot of these statistics also show the area and the places that we're failing as well. But let me just share a few of these with you. It said in 1985 there were over 35,000 career missionaries, and in 2015 there were over 50,000 that were sent from North America. That's only 15,000 increase in 30 years. Does that seem like something wrong to you? Just jumping through these, says 81% of the world's Hindu, Muslims, and Buddhists do not personally know a Christian. There's a lot of people away from the presence. You know, and there's a lot of people who probably consider themselves to be a Christian, but don't really act like it because they're not in the presence. They're just trying to produce things. For every 30 missionaries, one will go to an unreached people group. That's a rough estimate. That's people that have never heard the gospel. Really what these stats are telling me is that we just keep going back to the people that have already heard it. And like I say, part of that is because we're not really enthused about what we're trying to give them anyway. According to tribal religion, one missionary for every 60,000 people. Hindu religion, there's only one missionary for every 79,000. Unreligious religion, there's one missionary for every 71,000. Muslims, there's one missionary for every 405,500 people. What did Jesus say? The harvest is, or the fields are white. The harvest is plenty. Those stats tell me there's plenty of place for growth. Buddhist, there's one missionary for every 260,000 people. The word unreached people means less than 2% of evangelical Christian in the people group, is what that means. Over 6,700 unreached people groups in the world. That's a whole lot of people that's never heard the gospel. Unreached. Over 3.19 billion people who have not heard the gospel. Muslim unreached people groups are the most in need of missionaries. How many of you know that can cost you? Can cost you everything. But God still gives us the Great Commission to go into part of the world. All the world, right? I'm going to skip on down through here for a couple more things. Talks about money and mission statistics. People give $45 million to missions, or $1 billion to missions yearly. People also spend $45 billion on diet programs in America. Priorities are way out of line, completely upset. Christians earn more than $42 trillion a year. So if I do the math, if we just, as Christians, if we just pay our tithes, that's how much? $4.2 trillion. How much did we give in missions last year as a nation? 45 billion. That's a long, long ways from $4.2 trillion. Priorities are not where they're supposed to be. 6.4% of the money given to any cause is to missions. 450 million of the money given goes to missions towards unreached people out of the 45 billion. 20.3 billion is given to Christian nations. Americans spend on Halloween costumes for pets more than they do for missions. Something is terribly wrong. Terribly wrong. In 2001, 1% of the money given to missions went to unreached people groups. 1%. There's a problem in it. And then here's another talking about different trends. It is believed that Christians from China will be a powerful mission force in the years to come. You know, it's sad that a lot of missionaries are coming to America today to evangelize people, when we got churches on every corner. There's a problem with that. Too many people are worried about production instead of about presence. We got to get our focus changed. We got to get focused upon the Lord and His kingdom and what He's called us to do in the places He wants us to minister in. You know, and I want to read this last part of this article, and then I got a couple more things to say if the musicians would be making their way this way. But this says insight into all of these statistics, and I didn't give nowhere near all of them, but it says the bottom line is that American Christians are not prioritizing missions. We are caught up in the things of this world: Halloween costumes, phones, cars, and more. Jesus called all who follow Him to fulfill the Great Commission. And it's time for us to wake up and realize there are 3 billion people in the world who've never heard the gospel. There's people in this town today that haven't heard the gospel. That's a shame, with 50 to 60 something churches in this county. There's no reason why somebody shouldn't have heard the gospel. They haven't heard the gospel because we're worried about production instead of worrying about being in the presence of God. When we begin to walk in the presence of God from daylight to dark, when we go to sleep with Him, the things of our community will begin to change, even greater than they have. We've made a lot of strides in unity across our community in different things. But without the presence of God, we're not going to go anywhere. Production ain't going to get squat. If you don't put the seed in the ground, and you know, that goes back to that production mindset. Dalton, do you plant seed and expect it to come up the next day and produce fruit the next day? We don't see it the next day, do we? We plant seed expecting to have fruit, but it takes time. In this microwave world that we live in, we want the presence of God without spending any time with Him. We want the presence of God with all the stuff that we want to go along with it. Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30 says, "Come to me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." It's not that hard. We make it way harder than what it is. Going back to what I said earlier, presence is shifting from what am I doing for God to am I staying with God. In the coming days, I'm not talking about condemnation. I'm talking about let the Lord convict you where you're at. Go to Him and say, "Lord, am I staying with you, or am I just trying to do this because that's what I feel like I've been taught I need to do?" And let His presence deal with your heart. cultivate that relationship with Him. Like I said earlier, there would have been no fruit if there had been no intimacy. There wouldn't be no kids, there wouldn't be no grandkids without any intimacy. We expect things to be produced in our lives, but we spend no time with the Lord. No real intimacy with Him. Presence is shifting from what am I doing for God to am I staying with God? Are you going to be like Mary? Are you going to seek the good thing? Or do you want to continue to be like Martha and be worried about production, worried about busy serving others instead of the relationship? As we stand and open the altars this morning, if conviction's hitting you in either direction, if you don't know God today, today's a great time to get into His presence. If you need prayer physically, then come and we'll be glad to pray with you and for you.